What's good everyone, this is Alex from DopeBoyzMuzic, back with another sample breakdown. This time it's a sample called Rain from a recent sample pack called Lannavaara Sample Pack. I hope you enjoy this one, let's get straight to it. To give you a little backstory on this sample pack, my wife and I were at a place called Lannavaara like 2.5 years ago, and they had a piano in the Airbnb we stayed at. I just recorded myself playing a bunch of piano, a bunch of ideas. The best ideas, I tweaked them a little bit and I turned them into a piano loop pack. Now we've been at the same place again last year in August, and I was basically doing the same thing. But this time around, while I was playing, I was thinking, oh, a bass might sound nice on that, or a guitar might sound good on that. And this time around I decided to do an entire sample pack instead of just giving people like rough piano loops. And that's kind of the backstory of how this sample pack came about. So now where that's out of the way, let's get into the music. I want to show you the dry piano recordings first, and then I want to show you what I did to them. Here we have the chords. So these are the main chords of the sample. The first chord is what I would call a F major 7 sus 2. The second chord is a G sus 4. And the third chord is a A9 sus 4. So a lot of you probably have been working with similar bass movements already. Like, you know, you have a bass that does this. You know, what you could do is just put basic triads on top of those bass notes, like this. But in my opinion, I've done a lot of tracks that revolve around these chords and it's become a little bit boring to me. So what I would suggest you could try out is to work with sus 4, sus 2 chords and add 7ths, 9ths and 11ths maybe even to your chord in order to make them sound a little more interesting. So instead of just playing an F major chord, I decided to add a 7th and a sus 2. So personally, I believe this sounds much more interesting than this. The second chord is also not just a G major, but a G major like a sus 4 chord. Third chord is a A9 sus 4. And I really love this chord. I use it in a lot of music. It sounds very open, so instead of this. So the next element we have is this one, which is just low piano notes. I'm going to show you what I did with that in a second. And then we also have this little pattern here. Let's take a look at the chords first and what I did to them. So here we have a bunch of editing going on, as you can see. So the first thing we have is RVox. I like to use it as a simple to use compressor just to make stuff louder. You just drag this fader up and down and it does its thing. Next thing is a multiband compressor. This is just to get rid of some of the clickiness of the recording. You know, when you record a real piano, oftentimes, especially if it's an older one, you have like little click sounds and little things going on, so I try to get rid of that. EQ basically does the same thing. Okay, so the first creative element that we have is this RC20 retro color. This is a really cool tool if you want to give your instruments a vintage sounding touch. It does a lot of good things, so let's quickly check out what it does in this case. Okay, so we have noise turned on. Basically, it just adds a little bit of what you would hear in an old recording. The next thing we have is wobble, which basically messes with the pitch of a sample. This is good if your recording isn't 100% in tune, and the piano was very old, so it wasn't in tune like 100%. The wobble makes the pitch go up and down, so you're always in tune for a little while. So distort is basically just there to emulate some sort of tape distortion. Space is a reverb that I actually really like. I also like to use it without the other effects, just as a regular reverb. The next thing we have is an exciter. So I was showing you that I was EQing and compressing a lot of the high end. And now where the high end is out of the way, I want the other stuff that's left to come up a little bit again. Now, this is what we have so far. What I added next is elastic pitch. I really like working with elastic pitch. It has a X and a Y axis. Y axis is basically responsible for changing the pitch of the sample. You can set this to +5, +7, which means semitones. So this is like 7 semitones, 2 semitones. And it's great to just pitch your samples like a semitone up or down and see what they sound like. The X-axis is kind of like a filter. I don't even know what exactly it does, but it can sound really, really interesting. So I would definitely recommend you try this out if you can get your hands on it. Also, what elastic pitch does sometimes is it adds these artifacts to the sound, which I really like. So it adds little, almost like mistakes to the audio, which can make it sound more unique and interesting and less as if you're working with a VST plugin, for example. This isn't a VST plugin, it's an actual recording, but nonetheless, it can make it sound more interesting. So we have some reverb. This Oxide tape is a very, very dope tape emulation plugin from UAD. I kind of like to use this as an EQ actually, because these two knobs right here, they change the EQ curve of what you give into this plugin. So I turned this up to 15 and this to CCIR because this boosts the highs of the sample a lot. Like I said, I got rid of a lot of the squeaky noises and stuff, and I wanted to gain back some of that clarity. Camel Crusher I use as a filter. It's a free plugin that you can get, and it has this filter knob, and I use this for filter automation throughout the arrangement of the sample. So this doesn't really do anything except filtering. Then we have another EQ. I got rid of some of the lows, added some highs, added a transient master. What the transient master does in this case is it gets rid of some of the tail of the sound. If you have a sound and you want it to retreat faster, you can actually use transient master and turn down the sustain or any transient shaper tool that you have. So these are pretty much all the effects I was using on this. Let's take another listen. Next thing we have are the low piano notes that I was just talking about. What I did is I chopped every note and I reversed it. So now it supports the bass notes of the main piano. And later in the sample we have the piano melody pattern that I just showed you earlier. I added a chop to this with every note change. So if you remember, it was something like this. So I chopped it here, 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 and I played around with the order in which those chops appear to kind of create a new melody. So this is what all the piano sounds sound like together. Now we talked enough about the piano. The next thing that we have is this vocal run. So this is basically just some vocal chops that I chopped from one of our packs, Azure Dreams Volume 2. So the first thing I did to it is, if you listen to the dry run, I pitched it down 4 semitones in order to be in the same key as the piano that I'm working on. The next thing I added was this bit crusher, and this is just the Cubase stock bit crusher. It adds some nice texture to the sound. Then we have another camel crusher to filter off some of the high end and make the vocals sound a bit more behind everything else. And the last thing I added, and I really love adding this to vocal runs, is Valhalla Vintage Verb. So this is basically a digital reverb plugin, and you have all sorts of cool stuff that you can do with this. For example, you can set the decay to infinite basically. So this is a 70-second decay. You can play around with the mix and pre-delay. It's a very, very dope reverb. And it's also very simple to understand. So this is what the vocal runs sound like. And as you can hear, it has a very long tail. So this is 30 seconds of tail now. From now on we have some more elements. For example, we have this bass right here. I used Trillion for this bass. So the patch name is called Dr. Delightful. The next thing I added was some synthy chords. So this is Arturia's Juno 6, which is a very, very dope emulation of the actual Juno synthesizer. The preset is called Polaroid Showers. I think I worked a little bit with the filters, which is what I do most of the time to blend the sounds into my mix. And then we also have a pad sort of sound that layers the chords of the synthesizer. And the last thing we have is this plug sound right here, which is an Omnisphere patch. It's called Moogalicious. It's one of my favorite plug sounds, actually. I use it a lot. So this is the dry sound. And what I did is I added some Valhalla reverb again. Very dope reverb plugin. H delay, one of my favorite delays of all time. And because I really like the bit crusher on the vocals, I try to add the same technique to this plug, where I add a bit crusher and I make the sound really distorted, and then I filter off all the high end that doesn't sound nice anymore. So this is the bit crusher. And then with the filter, it sounds like this. Okay, these are all the sounds. Let's listen to the whole thing at once. So I hope you enjoyed this little sample breakdown. If you did, make sure to hit the like button. Make sure to subscribe if you haven't already. And I'll see you guys in the next video. Peace.